大家好，本期视频是近日美国的米尔斯海默教授与俄罗斯的杜金教授共同参加一档访谈节目的节选。这两位都是在当代国际关系和地缘政治学领域具有重要影响力的人物。米尔斯海默是芝加哥大学的国际关系学教授，作为进攻性现实主义的主要代表人物之一，他对关于中美竞争和大国冲突的观点和论述让他在中国人气很高。代表性著作是《大国政治的悲剧》。杜金是俄罗斯地缘政治学界的重要人物，以其新欧亚主义理论著称。他认为欧亚大陆是一个独立的地缘政治实体，其文化和历史与西方，尤其是美国有根本性的区别。他主张俄罗斯应作为欧亚大陆的领导者，对抗西方的海洋文明。他的代表性著作是第四政治理论。他曾在2018年11月受复旦大学中国研究院的邀请，在复旦大学进行了为期1个月的访问。在此期间，他开设了地缘政治与国际关系课程，4次演讲座无虚席，深受好评。不过他的影响主要集中在俄罗斯及部分欧亚国家，在西方学术界影响力有限，更多被视为一种意识形态工具。真正让他走进中国大众视野的是2022年8月，他的女儿杜金娜也是一名非常活跃的地缘政治专家和媒体人员，在莫斯科附近的一次汽车炸弹袭击中遇难，据称袭击目标可能是杜金本人。大家开始纷纷打听杜金是什么来头，有传闻说他是普京的国师，不过这个存在争议。访谈中，主持人问美国特朗普政府上台以后会不会在俄中联盟之间制造裂痕，也就是所谓的把俄罗斯从中国的怀抱中拉回西方。米尔斯海默教授的发言新意不多，他先是肯定了美俄结盟的重要性，因为这样可以让美国全力以赴地对付中国，但同时他认为这种可能性极低，因为多年来美国政策的失误让美俄两国在可预见的未来仍然会是死对头。
I'll answer that very quickly. I think it's clearly in America's interest, speaking as a strategist, for the United States to be allied with Russia. And that way, the United States can concentrate on containing China. And as you know, I've long argued that the United States should try to prevent China from dominating Asia, from becoming a regional hegemon. And I think it makes no strategic sense for the United States to drive the Russians into the arms of the Chinese, which of course we have done with our foolish policies. So your question is it likely that we will change our policy and that we will end up having good relations with Russia and in a sense separating the Russians from the Chinese? I think there is hardly any chance that that's going to happen, because I think, as we were discussing before, there's hardly any chance that relations between the United States and Russia are going to change anytime soon. And in fact, I believe, sadly, that the United States and Russia are going to be bitter enemies for the foreseeable future. And the end result of that is the United States is going to continue to try to damage Russia, to hurt Russia. And as a consequence of that, the Russians will have very close relations with the Chinese, because the Americans have their gun sights on China as well. You have this situation where the United States has its gun sights on both Russia and China. And unsurprisingly, Russia and China have become, I think it's fair to say, close allies, maybe not formal allies, but close allies, as they should be. And it doesn't make strategic sense for the United States, for sure. But doing things that make strategic sense is not something that the United States pays much attention to these days. So that's the sad state of affairs here in America.
杜金教授对这个问题的回答更详细一些，他同样认为美国新一届政府会从战略的角度重新平衡与俄中的关系，并且是偏向俄 而不利于中国。但他进一步指出，现在的多极世界不仅仅是美俄中三极，还有印度、拉美、非洲和伊斯兰这些新兴的极。如果美国成天想着拉俄抗中，是注定要失败的，因为这种战略理解方式已经过时。俄中并非只是权宜性的同盟，而是有更深远的意义。
So that is a very correct explanation and description, as long as I understand. I would say that I am a little more optimistic about strategical sense in Trump's future administration. I observe some trends inside of appointments and some people that I have contact with from newly established American Trump's administration that are the signs that maybe, I hope, there will be more strategical dimension in the future American policy, international relations. Relying on these sources or these presumptions, I would say, I could say that Trump will try to rebalance a little bit relations with Russia and China in favor of Russia and against China. That is not only his subjective individual understanding, but that is the logic, as Mr. Mearsheimer has said, the logic of strategical attitude. And I think that at some point, the new administration of Trump will try to make not peace, but just to calm down relations with Russia and to try to, I would say, to sabotage these strategical alliance, growing alliance between Russia and China. At least he would try. I think he will try to do that. But at the same time, that is an important thing that this strategical alliance between Russia and China, if we accept and if we agree, and I personally totally agree with Mr. Mearsheimer about the conditions of multipolarity already here, not just in the future, not as desire or plan or expectation, but the correct description of the reality, there are at least 3 complete and established poles: United States, obviously, the West, collective West, Russia and China, or China second and Russia. I agree with this consequence. But we should not forget India, Akhand Bharat, Greater India, emerging as well as independent player. Not on the side of China, not on the side of United States, not on the side of the Russia, but as something independent. And the Islamic world, now very, very weak, I agree, but Islamic world, Africa, Latin America, new emerging poles, maybe would-be poles, the future poles of multipolarity, they are already here. They are already in BRICS. So they are operating on the second level, establishing more and more elements of this multipolar world system. And in that sense, I think that is not about 3-polar vision. So, for example, to tear Russia from China and to get it closer to the United States is hardly imaginable, I think. But at the same time, I think that United States, Washington, will try to do that. They will try this strategical approach, and they will fail because it is old-fashioned way of understanding strategy. The strategy of the multipolarity is something totally else. Trump would try to do precisely that, to shift the attention from Russia to China, hostile attention, not positive attention. But I think that multipolarity is much deeper than it looks like now. So the relations between Russia and China are not about just situational alliance against the pressure of the collective West or United States. It's something deeper. And as long as I could judge, Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi Jinping, they understand the strategical depth of the Russian-Chinese alliance, Greater Eurasian Alliance, not just as situational response to the challenge of the mutual situation to be under some attack from the West. It's something further. So maybe we could finally doubt that the West is taller and further. Maybe it is smaller and sees closer to its own misconceptions of the reality. Reality of multipolarity demands the new hates, new positions, new strategical dimension. It is not only just let us keep Russian a bit closer and China a bit further from us. So we need to reconsider the relation on the other terms, and that is a challenge, I think, to the intellectuals of new wave, because the intellectuals of the old wave, they have lost everything. So their understanding of reality has totally failed, absolutely. So we need some new way of multipolar vision of the world, including American interests, including Western interests in values inside, not excluding. So we need to understand and accept the existence of some other, and maybe other, who is hostile to us, but we need to get inside of its brain and to think with him accordingly, not just project our wishful thinking or self-fulfilled prophecy on other. That is my point.
杜金对中国的态度变化是很多人关心的一个话题。在20世纪90年代，杜金更多关注俄罗斯与欧洲、伊斯兰世界以及和日本等国的潜在联盟，而对中国的态度较为谨慎。他认为中国的崛起对俄罗斯的远东地区构成潜在威胁，特别是在地缘政治和经济扩张方面。此时，杜金强调俄罗斯需要与中国保持距离，避免在地缘战略上被其压制。到了2000年代，随着中俄战略伙伴关系的加强，杜金的态度开始发生转变，他逐渐将中国视为俄罗斯对抗西方，尤其是美国单极世界秩序的重要盟友，将中国视为欧亚大陆不可分割的一部分，并提倡中俄联合，共同对抗西方的全球化进程。到了2010年代，杜金对中国的态度更为积极，特别是在“一带一路”倡议提出后，他认为中国的崛起和“一带一路”与俄罗斯的新欧亚主义目标高度契合。他公开赞扬中国的经济成就和治理模式，认为其为世界提供了一种非西方的现代化路径。他还支持中俄在能源、军事和文化等领域深度合作，强调两国共同抵制西方文化和价值观的侵蚀。在主持人问到他对中国态度的转变过程时，他是这么说的。
So it is not quite a few years, but that was more than 30 years ago that I have proposed my geopolitical understanding of the role of China in front of Russia, and that was beginning of the 90s. So it is not quite few years ago. Beginning of the 90s, that was totally different situation. Russia crashed. Russia totally submitted to the Western globalist agenda, unipolar moment, and China, in our eyes, was the kind of accomplice, the power that has betrayed Eastern identity and joined globalization process in order to be the part of the global pro-Western system. That looked like that. Maybe I was wrong already in that way. I could not judge that, but that was the idea of how to consider China being the part of the West, being more and more involved in the globalist economy. And in Russia, present pitiful conditions under Yeltsin, and that was precisely some geopolitical vision of that. China being more and more involved in the West, more and more globalized, and Russia more and more losing its sovereignty. So that was a kind of geopolitical despair, I would say. And the thoughts like that, they belong to this epoch. When I've tried when first of all, when Putin came to power, and second, when Xi Jinping came to power, we, in my eyes, in my Russian patriotic eyes, the situation was very, very different. So we see Russia returning to the global politics, maybe, as Mr. Mearsheimer has said, at third rank, far distant third pole after United States and China. I agree. I don't argue that we are number one. Maybe we are number three, but we are number. We are not nothing. We are number three with nuclear weapon. Number three, it's something. It is not nothing. So, but I agree, that is not about that. And from Putin's time and from Xi Jinping time, I have, and most of all after visiting, thanks to my friends in China, visiting China, teaching in Chinese Institute and Fudan University, and making contacts with different Chinese thinkers, I have a right. More than 20 years ago, it is not few years ago, so more than 20 years ago, I have arrived at the conclusion that China represents the main strategical ally for Russia in constructing multipolar world. And from that time, that is more than 20 years, or maybe more, I started to revise my previous geopolitical attitude of the age of despair of the early 90s. So many times I have explained that, but globalists, they are playing their game. They starting to cut some expressions and terms from previous without context of previous texts, and in order to destroy our relations. So I would say maybe I am not the only one who has changed this. That is much more important than myself. So I am not the only one who has corrected the attitude to China in a much more positive way. So multipolarity is much more than our national interests, than your Chinese national interests, American or Russian. And dealing with this strategical dimension that Mr. Mearsheimer emphasized always and emphasizes now, I think we need to teach the art to not only follow what is good and seems to be right to us in our eyes, but we need to understand others. So when I started to learn what China is, I have totally changed my opinion. So I think that I have missed the point in China, in Chinese involvement in globalization. What point I have missed? I have missed the point that China is still the great power, very national-centered society with the deep Confucianist ethics, and it could not be just socialist as in the West or capitalist. It is something Chinese. We need to understand, to get deeper and exploring the Chinese identity, to understand its behavior, its psychology. And finally, I think I came to the conclusion 20 and more years ago that China is most reliable ally of creating with Russia and other poles, as well as India, not too pro-Chinese, pole, the multipolar system. When we accept that the chess is the play, at least of the game of two players, at least, against Brzezinski, or in the multipolar case, more than two players, three at least, maybe four and more. So we are inside of strategical fields, and I think that we need to put the Russian-Chinese relations precisely in this field if we understand under the word strategy some meaning that Mr. Mearsheimer has explained previously very well.